Make India a developed country, a VIKSIT Bharat Vision Document 2047 is being readied. To talk more on the idea of a VIKSIT Bharat, I have with me the NITI Aayog member, Dr Arvind Virmani. Welcome to NDTV. First question, of course, relates to economy. Now, there's a lot of focus of India becoming the third largest economy in the world in the next 5 years. To make India economically developed by 2047, what is the larger idea, the vision that you have?
So, the way I look at it, as somebody who's worked on economic growth and development for 50 years, is that we were a low-income country till about 10 years ago. Then we became an lower middle-income country. And now there are two more steps in a way. So first is to become an upper middle-income country, say within the next 7 to 10 years, and then to become a high-income country in 20-25 years, just to give a broad picture. So that goal has crystallized and become much clearer. How do we get there? In one sentence, I would say, again, for your listeners, in a simple way, it is sustained, fast, inclusive growth. But each of those words is important. You can have fast growth for a few years and then again go down. So it has to be sustained and fast. It has to be inclusive, because you cannot leave. We know from history, from all other countries which have developed, have gone through this full stage, that it has to be inclusive, otherwise it stalls. So that is the broad picture. Now, when we look, and then just a small second aspect is that, so what is that growth? Growth is in per capita income. So when we are talking about developed, we are talking in terms of per capita GDP or per capita income, not of the size. That's a separate geopolitical issue which we can discuss. But when we are talking about this upper middle high income country, it is all in terms of per capita income. So one aspect is then a natural question is to ask that what happens to society, what is its impact. So my own analysis suggests that varying amounts, but between say 3/4 of the, if you take any indicator, half to 3/4 of that goes with the per capita income. So what does it mean? So if you're talking about say life expectancy or some education indicators, they basically, much of it increases with per capita income. So we are not forgetting, one cannot forget that. Some of that happens with per capita income, some the government in the form of public goods, infrastructure, etc. has to create. So all that is included in that fast inclusive growth. We can take up any specific aspect that you want. And then the third thing which one has to keep in mind is, what are the global trends? What is the context? Where is the economy going? How are we sitting with respect to other countries, the world, etc.? And then all these go into thinking about how you will get there and what you will have to do. Right. That is the broad picture.
In terms of the size of the economy, what are the projections that you have in mind? There is a talk that in the next 5 years, India will be the third largest economy. What are the larger projections we're looking at in terms of size of the economy?
Right. So size of the economy, again, different people have different projections. I have mine, which I gave in a talk in Claus a couple of months ago. The point of these projections is not to be, exact numbers, in my view, as a quasi-academic or a thinker. It is to give the broad trend and the picture. So that is how I look at it. So my projection suggests that we will be the third largest economy in 3 to 5 years. I prefer a band. It always will be very pleasant if it happens in 3 years. But if it happens in 5 years, because I'm not here to make one projection. I've been making projections all my life, and I like to be right. So there is a certain amount of uncertainty, because it depends on what happens in Japan, what happens in Germany, how quickly we overtake. But I'm confident that between 3 and 5 years, i.e. within 5 years, we will be the third largest economy.
Right. And by 2047?
At 2047, because anyway, once you are third, then the game in a sense changes. What then you are talking about or thinking about, or what I think about, is how to close the gap with China. because that is the third largest economy. We are talking current dollars or dollar terms. You know, we are already the third largest in PPP terms, but that is not the thing we focus on in terms of size. But in terms of per capita GDP, I always think in PPP terms. So two things: one, the per capita and how we will be high income, then the size. So as far as the size of the economy is concerned, the question is how quickly we close the gap. Okay, and there is a lot more uncertainty because the growth rate, we know, everybody talks about it. We don't know what is happening in China.
But in terms of projections, I mean, what is the size of the economy?
I'm just saying, so we will be at least, in my projections, my middle projections, my upper projections, we will catch up by around 2050. But in the middle or lower consumption, we may be around 80% of the Chinese economy.
By 2047?
By 20, I generally think of 2050, but yes, you can take 2047.
2047.
Yeah.
But what in terms of numbers, it would be what? What is the size of the economy?
See, this is all in PPP current dollars. It will not mean, you know, in my experience, one can be much, we have to do, we do projections of people where I have record. You'll excuse me, people do different ways of doing it. It's okay. I have no problem.
Difficult to do that.
You know, but in my view, I am not confident of projections which are not based on real. So I only do real.
Right.
So the number I give you, you will not associate with. It is not the current dollar. It is PPP equivalent.
But per capita income, you believe, will substantially increase?
All those things I'm saying will come to pass. We will be 80% of China. But you want a dollar number, I cannot give you because my projections are in PPP terms.
Okay.
You know, the number you are familiar with, you're asking me is current dollars.
Okay.
I don't do projections like that.
Okay. So the next question will be, how do we get there?
Right.
Now you're saying that by 2050, by 2047, India would be 80% of the size of the Chinese economy. Now this is a very important statement. So now, how do we get there? But
remember, this is my projection. There will be 100 other projections.
Understood.
Different people have different...
We're talking about your projection.
That's right.
But in terms of the steps that are needed to reach that signpost, what are the big steps that will be needed in the next 2 decades?
So let's think slowly. I mean, in 2-3 steps. So what is the approach? Okay, and then is implementation, right? So the approach, I would say, is in 2 or 3 terms. I'll squeeze it to 2. One is that sustained fast growth. How do we get that? Okay, so we know from experience. So most of the countries which have gone through this process from lower to high income are in Southeast Asia. Okay, so we know that you have to create the environment. Okay, for private sector to generate GDP and growth. The question is always how to do it, where to focus, and we can come to that, right? But the basic principle is very clear. Now, you know, we are very clear, and I can say even for the government that the government is very clear. The government of Prime Minister Modi is very clear that those environment has to be created. Okay, and there are many aspects we can go to it. So the policy and institutional reform. Much has been done. I could give you a 1-hour lecture on that, but I won't. And we must continue. You know, there is no end to it because new problems arise. You must be open to saying, okay, there's a new problem, let us address it. So one is that policies have to constantly
evolve,
be updated and
evolve
given what happens. Okay. Then is the public goods infrastructure. Now, again, Gati Shakti and other infrastructure, a lot has been done. But for example, new things are now, digital economy, in my view, is going to become critical. So one of, you could say new, I mean, it's already on the agenda, but new in the sense that I believe every citizen in this country must get access to it. If you're going to have that inclusive part. Remember? Sustained, fast and inclusive. Okay, so the digital economy, in my way of looking at it, is going to play a huge role in making things inclusive, in getting to the people in the rural areas, in the remote areas, in the hilly areas, right? We have such a diverse country. So that is one aspect. And the third aspect, just to give you a broad view, is empowerment. Okay, so we of course have kind of Antyodaya, basic needs. We have provided electricity access, LPG, etc. You know all that. But if I look forward, the empowerment part is going to be very, very critical. Everybody has to have the basic education, what we call FLN, functional literacy and numeracy, and job skills. So this job skills part is going to be the big challenge. We all talk about job skills, a lot of people know about it, but it's going to be a big industry, because that is how we are going to take advantage of the demographic trends, etc.
Skilling of the youth.
Everybody. Why do I say that? Before this, you mentioned technology, right? Technology is going to change. There's going to be new ways of doing it. So even people who are doing something, for example, there may be a carpenter, old carpenter. I have actually had experience of a rural carpenter myself personally. The carpenter may be doing certain things in some way, but technology changes. Instead of wooden chairs, there may be plastic chairs. Or a plumber who was earlier connecting metal pipes may have to now connect plastic pipes. I'm just giving you an example. You have to retrain them. They have to be
adaptation.
retrained somehow.
So adaptation,
right?
To
so skilling, it's upskilling, it's reskilling. So skilling is everywhere. It's not just the youth. Yes, of course, the youth. There's no question about it, right? So, but it's appropriate skills. It's low skills, middle skills, upper skill. It's what I call. I have a picture. I call it skilling is a 3D issue. And I have a graph which is 3D. Anyway, so there are many things like that. There's, of course, pending things which also have to be taken care of. We all know about the labor code, tax reform. A lot has been done, but we can do more.
This is important. I wanted to ask you on this, that does India also need to think about the next generation of economic reform process?
Absolutely. That's precisely what I said. That a lot has been done in from 14 to 19, but in pandemic, we used to. I dealt with have dealt with many crises in the government, and in the 1991, we coined this word: "Don't let a crisis go to waste." Okay. So it turns out, very fortunately, I was not in government at that point. This government has done exactly that. In the pandemic, we had a pandemic, it's a very serious problem, but the reforms happened. A lot of reforms happened which people, I think, don't give enough weight to. But your question is, will things have to be done? Yes, there are some things still left which have been put on the table, which should be completed, will be completed, and I'm pretty hopeful or sure. And there will be things which are need to be taken forward. I mentioned taxes. Now GST was a major reform, major constitutional reform, major thing. But given that constitutional reform is difficult, certain compromises had to be made. It's always true, if you want a big constitutional change. So like that, there are areas, there are customs. The finance minister herself has talked about inverted duty structures. So there are many things pending which will have to be taken up in the next 5 years if we are going to remember. We are not just talking about 1 year. We are talking about sustained, fast, inclusive growth for 25 years to become a high-income country.
So you need a new mindset, new set of policies, next generation of reforms, and continuously adapt to the advancement of technology.
So the answer to your next generation is yes, of course. I was just trying to fill it out and say the dimensions of that.
Yeah. Ease of doing business. There's a lot of talk of India becoming a manufacturing hub, global manufacturing hub.
So part of that is trade policy, for example. We have to look. That's also my area was in the finance ministry. The customs duty reform was my big effort. So yes, the whole manufacturing sector, the trade and industrial policy is very important. The PLI, for example, the FTAs. We could have a long talk on the FTAs and the supply chains, but you don't have the time. But all that, yes.
FTAs would be important now.
Yes, FTAs are a key part of taking this opportunity for manufacturing, which has arisen because of geo-economic and geopolitical reasons. Is basically our last opportunity to drive manufacturing growth, which really didn't attain its full potential earlier.
Right. Infrastructure, a lot of focus on capex in recent budgets. Do you see that infrastructure will be one sector on which India will have to invest a lot of funds in next 2 decades?
So infrastructure, again, I would say is not a new thing. We will have to continue to close the gap. So remember what I said about per capita income. when we go to upper middle, higher income, there are parts of the infrastructure which are still backward. For example, I have always been a big advocate of sewage, better sewage systems, for example. So there are these gaps, right? We don't have the quality of sewage systems, say, which an upper income country needs or a high income country. So yes, the infrastructure levels have to be brought to that level which we aspire for.
City infrastructure.
So in economic term is called public goods infrastructure. So the public good, the element when we put public good, that means the private sector is not going to do by itself. The government will have to make sure it happens by whatever appropriate, efficient, quick means.
Right. And so you think that big cities, for instance, now in this age of climate change, there is a rise in the intensity, frequency and scale of disaster incidents, and we see a lot of public money going down the drain during these disasters, especially if it happens in big cities, for instance.
So clearly climate change and the energy aspects, etc., are going to be an important, there are various trends. We didn't go into all of them. But there are various trends, various threats, opportunities, etc. So energy has always been a problem for us because we import so much of our oil. So in some sense, I wouldn't like to use the word hostage. So we tend to suffer whenever oil prices rise. And everybody knows that it's decided by countries. It is not a free market in any sense of that word, right? So whenever they decide for their own reasons, we are the ones who suffer, right? So solar is clearly, solar, e-mobility, etc. is clearly already visible.
Renewable
that
energy
will be important. Well, I focus on solar because I think that is going to be 90%, 10% maybe wind or something. That's why. Solar. As a macro person, I have to focus on the most important things, whether they are in agriculture or wherever. The details are always, there are other people who think about it. So from my perch, clearly that solar element is very important. And what you said, the disaster, the negative effects of climate change, obviously we must try to understand and anticipate and do minimization.
Right, and there is an effort now to increase the quantum of ethanol that we blend with petrol. That would gradually reduce dependence on crude oil.
So again, in my view, the key is going to be solar. Okay. We have to be very careful that we do not. So we don't have, in some sense, I tend to tell people that India has a holistic and pragmatic approach. Okay, what does that mean in this case? That means there is no one solution. Okay, so our approach is holistic. We are talking about lifestyles. We are talking about millets, which as against wheat and rice, which use more water. So water is another problem for us. We cannot just proceed as if water will come from the skies. So we have to be holistic, right? We can't just pick out one solution and then ignore the possible negative effects.
It's a holistic approach, basically.
That's right. You have to have a holistic approach. And I think that has to be done and hopefully will be done. I say again, I'm not speaking for the government. I'm speaking from my thinking. So you have to take a holistic approach. For example, there are certain raw materials which produce a lot of pollution. Now, we cannot say, okay, this is the thing, we'll take this and we'll put this material in every battery. You have to also think about what will be the negative effect, right? It has to be a holistic approach. That's all I would say. So I would not go overboard on any one solution. We must make sure, obviously if you have a surplus of baggies, you can use it for ethanol. But if you are going to use more water, you're going to have a water problem. You can't ignore that. You can't say we will just go and use this for certain purpose and then 10 years later you say, oh gosh, we have a huge water problem. So you have to think holistically.
Right. One last question to you. This is about artificial intelligence and the other advancements have happened. Do you believe that India will now also need to focus more? And you have spoken in detail about the need for better adaptation to the advancement of these new technologies across the spectrum, at the government sector, private sector, at the individual level, skilling of manpower. How important will it be for India to actually focus on using more and more of artificial intelligence for public good, and how important future technologies will be?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I have a slightly different approach to what you read every day and you hear Western people. So here is my approach. And this is one of the trends which we didn't have a time to discuss because we are not going academically. So demographics, global demographics is one of the huge trends which drives many of my thinking on different issues. We didn't go systematically, maybe some other day. But the basic demographic is that the share of developed countries like US, EU, UK, all these ones you usually talk about, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, in working age population is declining, has declined in the last 30 years and will decline even further in the next 30 years. India is the only country, and also our potential competitors, what we call in economic terms, whether it's Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, they're all, China of course is now talked about. All these people's share of working age population is going down. India is the only country whose share will go up. Okay, so we have to think differently about robotics and AI. That's my basic conclusion. All these countries will think of replacing human manpower because they are short of it with automatic robotic stuff. We have to think how we can use AI expert systems, I can discuss that further, to leverage the quality of our services. So we have, I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned that there's a huge problem of job skilling. There's a problem of just basic education, okay, in many parts of our country. So what we have to do is use expert systems, AI, whatever you want to call it, to improve the quality of this, of our education, of our skilling. That's possible already. Okay? So this, we should not get completely caught up in the way they think. They will think what is good for their economy. I don't need to replace people. I need to make them more productive.
Yes.
Okay, so the research is already showing that low-skilled professionals, when they are assisted by AI, I call it expert system, AI, they perform at middle level. The middle people perform at high level. The high-level people are the least to gain. So that is the kind of thing I think we have to do. I am not saying that AI is not needed. For example, in security, AI is going to be critical because you need fast decisions. But for 90% of the economy, you don't need that. What you need is better skilled people. Okay? The coin, I mean, I'll finish with the word. This is what I always think of. Skill for India, skill for the world. There's a huge opportunity. So we should use AI expert system to improve the quality of our skills. Whether it's in education, whether it's in governance, whether it's in health. Health system can be greatly improved. Just think of rural areas. From the research I have seen, a large part of it is just dealt with by quacks who have no knowledge. Okay, if they had access to an expert system, the quality of their stuff would improve tremendously. I'm not talking about morality, I'm just talking about what would be effective. I mean, you could say quacks are illegal, but you can keep saying that, but people are using it. So I would much rather give them access to an expert system which improves the quality of what they are doing.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for